The first sound I remember was the slow, methodical beep of a heart monitor. Then came the fluorescent hum of hospital lights, the sterile chill in the air, the weight of my own body, like I was tied to the mattress. I couldn't move. Not yet. But I was awake. I was back. Or so I thought. There were voices outside the curtain, low and muffled at first. But then, hers, my wife's. We'll sort the paperwork once he's officially transferred to long-term care. I just didn't think he was going to make it. Then a male voice. Familiar. Closer. He's awake now. You sure he won't remember anything? She sighed. That sigh. I knew it too well. It doesn't matter. The marriage is done. I married Tony last month. I waited 6 months. I thought he was gone. Tony. My cousin.
That was the moment I realized sometimes death isn't the greatest betrayal. It's what they do when they think you're already dead. I blinked slowly, pretending to still be unconscious. A tear slipped into my ear. In that moment, I didn't feel pain, not the physical kind. What I felt was something colder, like being buried while still breathing. She didn't cry when I was wheeled in. She didn't pause when they told her I might not make it. She moved on, not in grief, but in calculation. She didn't bury me. She replaced me. And the man she replaced me with, he shared my blood.
I came back with clarity. Clarity sharp enough to cut through every lie they thought I was too broken to see. In the days that followed, I said nothing. I let them think I remembered nothing. Every morning, a nurse wheeled me to the edge of the hospital garden. I sat there, still, quiet, half-shaded in the sun, watching birds chase each other through the trees. She came only twice that week. The first time, she brought flowers. Tulips. I hate tulips. She knows that. The second time, she brought Tony. He stood by the doorway, not close enough to be seen as suspicious, but not far enough to be respectful either. His arms were crossed, his eyes scanning everything but mine. She smiled like a woman bringing comfort to a distant uncle, not a husband she used to fall asleep next to every night. "How are you feeling?" she asked. I didn't respond. I blinked. Just once. Her smile faded. Tony nudged her, muttered something I didn't catch, and they left. Quickly. That's when I began piecing it together. Slowly. Carefully. Like a man walking barefoot across broken glass. The signs had been there, long before the coma. Late-night errands that never added up. Bank statements that needed explaining. My cousin dropping by more often, always when I was asleep or in the shower. My phone going missing one day and reappearing with a cracked screen and wiped messages. The night before my collapse, she had come home late, said her sister needed help with her newborn. No kiss, no warmth, just the sound of her heels walking away from me in the hallway. I remember lying in bed that night, my chest tight, my arms numb, trying to convince myself it was heartburn. It wasn't. It was a stroke. Or maybe a warning. A warning that my body could no longer carry the weight of a marriage already rotting from within. After the coma, I asked the nurse for my belongings. There was no wedding ring among them. When I asked about it, she looked confused, said I wasn't wearing one when I arrived. I had never taken it off in 27 years. That day, I called my bank. My name was still on the account, but barely. She had moved half our savings into a joint investment account with Tony. The one we used to joke about over family barbecues. The one I bought his first car with. The one I trusted enough to co-sign a loan for when he almost lost his business. They were planning while I was fading, scheming while I was surviving, sleeping soundly while I was fighting for breath under machines. But here's the thing about pain. It sharpens your memory. And now, mine was clearer than ever. I started watching. Every twitch in her voice. Every word they said around me when they thought I wasn't listening. Tony came to see me one afternoon, alone. He brought a flask of tea, like old times. "Just wanted to check up on you," he said, trying to smile. I said nothing. Just looked at his hands. Same hands that once helped me lift bricks when we built my back patio together. Now they trembled.
He reached for his cup and spilled some. "Sorry, still not sleeping right." I nodded, my face calm. He sighed. "Look, I know it's complicated, but we didn't think you were coming back. She was alone. We leaned on each other." He trailed off. I just blinked again. Let the silence fill the room like rising water. He looked away. That was the moment I knew. Guilt isn't loud. It's silent. It's sweaty palms and unfinished sentences and eyes that can't hold your stare. And they had it. Both of them. But they still believed I was weak. Grateful to be alive. Powerless.
They didn't realize I was rebuilding something. Not just my muscles, not just my speech, but my memory, my will, and soon, my plan. But even the strongest plan needs people, witnesses, anchors, voices that remind you you're not crazy. So I reached out, not to confront, not yet, just to be heard. I called my younger sister first, Lillian. We hadn't always been close, but she was there when I married Evelyn. She knew our story. She had danced barefoot at our wedding, cried when we lost our first baby, and once said Evelyn was the best thing that ever happened to me. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, stranger," she said, cheerful, distracted. I could hear kids playing in the background. I waited for a quiet moment, then said, "Lil, I need to talk to you. Something's not right with Evelyn, with Tony."
The line went still. I told her everything, carefully, slowly. I didn't dramatize. I just laid out the facts, like stepping stones across a river I hadn't dared cross before. She was quiet the whole time. When I finished, she let out a breath. "Brother," she finally said, "I love you, but you've been through a lot. I mean, you were out for months. People change. Situations change. Maybe she just didn't know what to do. Maybe you're remembering it wrong." It hit harder than I expected. Not her words, her tone. That gentle, condescending tone people use when they think you're lost in your own story. I didn't argue. I thanked her and hung up. But inside me, something cracked.
Not from the betrayal, from the dismissal. Next, I called my son. He's 28, works in finance. Sharp, no nonsense. I figured if anyone could follow the paper trail, it'd be him. He listened longer than Lillian did. But when I brought up the marriage license Evelyn and Tony signed while I was still in the hospital, he cut me off. "Dad, this sounds paranoid." "I have copies," I said, "bank transfers, power of attorney forms signed with forged dates. Her name is on my private investment account. So is his." He went silent. Then, "Look, even if it's true, you were gone, Dad. Maybe she was just scared. Maybe she thought she had to survive." I almost laughed. Survive? Not from the betrayal. From the dismissal. Next, I called my son. He's 28, works in finance. Sharp, no nonsense. I figured if anyone could follow the paper trail, it'd be him. He listened longer than Lillian did. But when I brought up the marriage license Evelyn and Tony signed while I was still in the hospital, he cut me off. "Dad, this sounds paranoid." "I have copies," I said, "bank transfers, power of attorney forms signed with forged dates. Her name is on my private investment account. So is his." He went silent. Then, "Look, even if it's true, you were gone, Dad. Maybe she was just scared. Maybe she thought she had to survive." I almost laughed. Survive? On whose money? In whose house? He said, "I'm not taking sides. Just don't go looking for enemies everywhere. Maybe focus on getting better." Click. That night, I sat by the window in my rehab apartment. Outside, the moon was full, spilling light over the cracked sidewalk like silver milk. I thought of all the nights Evelyn had slept beside me, her back warm, her breathing soft. I thought of every dinner I cooked, every coat I hung for her, every anniversary gift I'd chosen with care. I thought of the time she cried when my mother passed, and I had held her through the night even though I was the one who had lost a parent. I thought I had built a life brick by brick with someone who'd do the same for me. Turns out, I was laying those bricks alone. And when the structure cracked, she ran. No, she didn't just run. She rearranged the furniture and let someone else move in. I whispered aloud to the silence. I could forgive betrayal, but being doubted by a loved one? That cracked something deeper. Because if the people closest to you won't believe you, you stop trying to be believed. You start building something else. Not a case, not revenge, but resolve. The kind that doesn't ask for permission. The kind that moves in silence. The kind that, when it lands, is final and irreversible. That was the kind of resolve I carried when I returned home for the first time. They didn't expect me that day. My son drove me. He still didn't believe everything, but he was willing to help now, more out of guilt than conviction. The driveway had changed. New lights, my favorite oak tree trimmed down without care, and a security camera installed above the garage, angled not at the street, but at the door. The same door I'd built with my hands 22 years ago. She opened it with surprise, a little too quickly. Behind her, Tony stood barefoot in my slippers, sipping coffee from my world's best dad mug. She forced a smile. "You're not supposed to be here yet. The doctor said—"
"This is still my house," I said, softly. Tony chuckled under his breath. That was his mistake. I didn't look at him. I looked past them both to the photo frames on the console table. My wedding picture was gone, replaced with a portrait of Evelyn and Tony at some beach resort. She wore the necklace I gave her on our 10th anniversary. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't raise. I simply walked in. They didn't stop me. I walked past the living room, past the remodeled kitchen I didn't authorize, and into my study. The walls had been painted beige.
My books were boxed up. My desk had been replaced. But I found what I came for. An old safe hidden behind the cabinet. They never knew it was there. Inside, copies of our mortgage, business partnership agreements, the will, and a set of original title documents I had tucked away like a fool who still believed in trust. I took them. On my way out, Tony stepped forward. "You need to let it go, man. You're lucky to be alive. Why stir up drama?" I looked at him and smiled. But I didn't speak. Not yet. Instead, I made one more stop, at my old law partner's office, Daniel Garcia. We'd started to practice together before he went private. We hadn't spoken in 5 years. He welcomed me with raised brows. "Back from the dead," he said, only half joking. I laid everything on his desk. "What do you want to do?" he asked, eyes scanning the documents. I stared out the window at the city moving below us. "I want to undo what they tried to steal while I was still warm."
He nodded slowly. "You'll need to stay calm. This is going to be surgical." I looked him dead in the eyes. "Daniel, I've already died once. Nothing scares me anymore." He walked me through the plan. They'd used a limited durable power of attorney to move some assets. That meant they claimed I was unfit to make decisions while I was unconscious. They'd transferred half the house into a trust with Tony as co-trustee. That gave them power to sell without my full consent. But Daniel had one trick. He leaned in, voice low. "If we can prove coercion or undue influence while you were medically incapacitated, we can blow the whole thing open. But we need records, proof, and a damn good timeline." I nodded. He paused, then added, "You can lose if you fight emotionally, but if you think smart, you'll win without ever raising your voice." That stayed with me, because I didn't want to fight. I wanted a reset. I didn't want revenge. I wanted my life back, clean, sharp, and undeniable. So I began collecting. Hospital intake records, EEG scans, my attending physician's signed statement that I was unresponsive at the time the power of attorney was signed. Then came the surveillance footage. Turns out, Evelyn had visited the notary office with Tony 2 weeks before I even woke up. 2 weeks. They didn't even wait until I could blink on command. The final blow? Emails between Tony and a mutual friend joking about needing to flip the house before the old man surprises them. He even called me the asset. I printed it all. Not out of rage, but precision. When you're at war with cowards, the quietest weapon is the most dangerous one. And I was just getting started. The legal groundwork was forming beneath my feet like the slow rise of a tide, quiet but unstoppable. Still, part of me hoped that someone, anyone from the family would speak up, step in, or even just look me in the eye and say, "What they did to you was wrong." Instead, silence. No one called. No one came. The same people who toasted to our 20th anniversary, who danced barefoot at our cookouts and passed mashed potatoes across my Christmas table, were now busy staying out of it. I called my cousin Elaine, Tony's sister. We grew up together. She used to say I was the older brother she never had. I remembered her sitting on my shoulders when she broke her leg, begging me to carry her everywhere. She picked up, hesitant. I asked her plainly, "Did you know?" Long pause. Then, "It's not my business." I almost smiled. "But it was your business when you asked me to co-sign your mortgage, wasn't it?" Silence. I didn't ask again. Next came Harold, my oldest friend, and once Tony's best man. I invited him to lunch. He showed up late, shifting in his seat like a man wearing a wire. I heard things got messy, he said. But Evelyn and Tony, they told us you were, not coming back. That you wouldn't want to drag it all through court now that you've recovered. They said that? He nodded. They said you were tired, that you just wanted peace. Evelyn even said you gave her your blessing. My fork paused midair. My blessing? He looked embarrassed. That's why no one's reached out, he added. They made it sound like you were, letting it all go. Letting it go. They'd rewritten my silence as surrender, turned my restraint into consent. And the people I had once fed, clothed, and stood up for, they accepted the new version without question. Why? Because it was easier than facing the ugly truth, that they all stood by while I was buried alive. I sat through that lunch, nodding, smiling politely, while my stomach burned. On the way home, I stopped by the park. Watched two boys race up a hill, laughing so hard they fell halfway down and didn't even care. And I realized something. There's a loneliness that comes after betrayal that no phone call can fix. It isn't loud, it doesn't sob or scream. It just settles over you like fog. Quiet, cold, and unshakable. That night, I went through old photo albums, not out of sentiment, but confirmation. Weddings, holidays, graduations. I had been there for all of them, paid for most of them. And when I needed them, they gave me silence. Or worse, believed the lies. That's when I wrote the first name down on the envelope. Elaine. Then Harold. Then 5 more. People who didn't betray me directly, but chose the easy story over the true one. Each one would get a letter when it was all done. Not with anger,
But with facts. Because I wanted them to know, not guess, what silence had cost them, and what it had cost me. As I folded the first envelope, I spoke to the quiet. Sometimes the ones who share your blood are the first to doubt your worth. But that's okay, because soon they would remember exactly who I was. Not just a man who paid for the barbecue grill and built the deck behind the house, not just the quiet husband who drove everyone home after parties and always left with the folding chairs no one else offered to carry. No, I was the man who watched, who remembered, and who never moved without purpose. And now, I was moving. But not with noise, with silence. They expected me to break, to cry, to beg. That's the thing about guilt. It doesn't get louder when you scream. It gets quieter when you don't. And so I stopped calling. I stopped showing up. I didn't ask anyone to listen. I let Evelyn and Tony think I was retreating. I knew they watched my every move, my bank card activity, my physical therapy schedule, my messages to our son. I let them believe I was just tired. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Daniel and I were laying out every document, date, and signature like dominoes. We mapped timelines, compared email headers to legal documents, collected hospital admission logs, surveillance footage from a notary office, the voice recording of Evelyn telling a nurse he doesn't even have brain activity. She said it laughing. We filed quietly. No threats. No letters. No warning. Then came the mediation request. I declined. Tony's lawyer called Daniel, asking for a peaceful sit-down. Daniel passed the message to me. They're trying to end this before it hits court, he said. They know we're about to expose more than just asset fraud. What do they want? A proposal, Daniel said, smirking. She wants to keep the house. He wants to settle for a split of your pension. I laughed.
A full, deep laugh, the kind I hadn't allowed myself since before the coma. Tell them I'm not negotiating with squatters. But still, the pressure came. My son called.
"Dad, they said you're dragging this out." "I'm correcting something that should never have happened." He sighed. "Look, maybe it's time to let go. You have your health back. Why waste energy chasing the past?" I stayed calm. "That house is where your mother said her vows, and where she broke them. I don't care about bricks. I care about the truth." "You're being cold," he said. I replied, "I'm being clear." After that, I stopped responding to emotional pleas. I no longer needed permission to feel wronged, and I no longer owed anyone an explanation. The silence made them squirm. Evelyn sent a letter, handwritten. I burned it without opening it. Tony left a voicemail. "We can fix this like family."
I deleted it because they weren't family. Family doesn't forge your name while you're in a coma. Family doesn't step into your house with your wife and try on your slippers. Family doesn't tell others you gave them permission to erase you. No, what they wanted now wasn't peace. It was control. But control only works if the other person is still dancing to your tune. And I had already left the room. One evening, our mutual friend Charles asked to meet. He was trying to be neutral, the kind of man who says, "I just want everyone to be happy." We met at a bench overlooking the water. He tried his best. "They're not bad people. They just made a mistake. Maybe if you could forgive."
I cut him off. "They didn't make a mistake. They made a choice, and now I'm making mine." He looked stunned. "You're really going to take this to court?" "No," I said. "I'm going to take it to the end." He never called again. I didn't mind, because by now it was bigger than betrayal. It was about dignity, about proving that silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. That just because I didn't fight back with fists didn't mean I wouldn't land a blow they'd never recover from.
Let them call it petty. Let them call it obsession. I called it peace. Because the truth was, he wasn't just taking things. He was rewriting the story, making himself the victim, and I couldn't let him keep the pen. They had written me out of my own story, buried me beneath their convenience and lies, and handed each other the roles of grieving wife and loyal cousin. But now, I was writing the ending, quietly, sharply, without a single wasted line. First move, I bought a burner phone. Not because I was hiding, but because I didn't want them tracking my calls anymore. I'd noticed Evelyn's tone changed every time I spoke to anyone, even my son, like she already knew what I'd said, and I wasn't about to hand over my next chapter through digital breadcrumbs.
Second move, I hired a second lawyer. Not instead of Daniel, beside him. A specialist in medical power of attorney and fiduciary abuse. Her name was Celeste. Young, but brilliant. The kind of woman who wore quiet-colored suits and asked questions that made grown men tremble. We met in a downtown cafe, neutral ground. I gave her everything. The hospital admission dates, the forged transfer of power of attorney, Evelyn's signature dated 2 weeks before I showed brain activity. The marriage certificate filed just 38 days after that. She flipped through the pages slowly, then closed the file. "You've got them," she said flatly. "Now the question is, what do you want?" I didn't hesitate. "I want everything that was mine back.
and I want her to have to explain why she signed away my name while I was still breathing. She leaned in. Then we'll file in 2 courts, probate and civil. One for the fraud, the other for damages. I nodded.
Then she added, "And there's one more angle." She opened a folder. Turns out Tony had used some of my funds to invest in a silent partner deal for a small logistics company, a business now tied to several questionable accounting records and a pending IRS audit. Celeste smiled. If he testifies, this opens up. That was the moment I realized I didn't need to fight them. I needed to let the truth do what fire does to paper. Burn. Quietly. Completely. Next, I visited the notary who'd stamped the original power of attorney. She was older, sharp, nervous when she saw the papers again. "I don't recall this appointment," she said, flipping through her logbook. I pointed to the timestamp.
You signed that while I was still in ICU. I have hospital records that prove I was on life support at that moment. She looked pale. I could lose my license. Just tell the truth, I said. You don't have to go down with them. She nodded, already reaching for her phone. Step by step, quietly and without theatrics, I pulled the threads. Evelyn had sold one of our joint stocks to cover the kitchen remodel, illegally. Tony had used my identity to secure a short-term loan he defaulted on 2 months later. They had used my stillness, my absence, as camouflage. But I was back now, and I had questions. The most chilling one came when I confronted Tony's new partner in the logistics company, a woman named Amanda, who had no idea who I was. She invited me in, confused by my presence. I simply handed her a copy of the loan Tony had signed under my name. "He's married to my wife now," I said quietly, "and I'm about to take back what they built on my Coma." She swallowed hard. "Are you threatening me?" I smiled. "No, I'm asking you something simple. Can you carry the burden he's about to become?" She stared at the paper in her hands, realization slowly clouding her face. I left without another word. Sometimes you don't need to slam the door. Sometimes the click is loud enough. The next morning, Celeste filed the fraud complaint. Daniel followed with the civil suit.
Evelyn and Tony were officially served. Not by me. By the system they tried to manipulate. A system I helped build. A system I knew better than them. My son called that night. "I got a call from Mom. She's freaking out. Tony, too." I said nothing. He asked, "Was this your plan all along?" "No," I said. "My plan was to grow old with your mother. She changed the plan. I'm just correcting the course." He was quiet for a while. Then, "I didn't know." "I know you didn't. That's why I'm not angry with you." He asked, "What happens now?" I answered calmly, "Now we wait." Because the storm had been silent so far, but the thunder was coming. And it didn't arrive with yelling or fists. It came in a quiet conference room with beige walls and a long table no one wanted to sit at. The court had ordered mandatory mediation before trial. Evelyn and Tony requested a delay. Denied. When I walked into that room, I didn't come with emotion. I came with a slim black folder and a pen that clicked once. They were already seated. Evelyn wore a pale pink suit, the same one she'd worn to my retirement party. Tony looked older, gaunt, paler than I remembered. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Their lawyer stood between them, shuffling papers, whispering urgently. My lawyers, Daniel and Celeste flanked me, calm and still. They'd prepared the battlefield down to the last inch. The mediator, a gray-haired man with tired eyes, welcomed everyone and began reading from the case file. It didn't take long before Evelyn's lawyer tried to break the flow. My client would like to propose a solution that avoids dragging this through the public system. Celeste slid a sheet across the table. No need. The solution is already here. The lawyer frowned, skimmed the paper, then paled. What is this? The timeline, Daniel said, cool and slow. Medical records, signature logs, notarization timestamps, financial withdrawals, all in conflict with Mr. Owen's state of consciousness at the time. A clear abuse of fiduciary authority, and in one case, documented identity fraud. Tony finally looked up. Wait, what fraud? I met his gaze. My lawyers, Daniel and Celeste, flanked me, calm and still. They'd prepared the battlefield down to the last inch. The mediator, a gray-haired man with tired eyes, welcomed everyone and began reading from the case file. It didn't take long before Evelyn's lawyer tried to break the flow. My client would like to propose a solution that avoids dragging this through the public system. Celeste slid a sheet across the table. No need. The solution is already here. The lawyer frowned, skimmed the paper, then paled. What is this? The timeline, Daniel said, cool and slow. Medical records, signature logs, notarization timestamps, financial withdrawals, all in conflict with Mr. Owen's state of consciousness at the time. A clear abuse of fiduciary authority, and in one case, documented identity fraud. Tony finally looked up. Wait, what fraud? I met his gaze.
You signed a bank loan in my name. The account was closed 2 weeks after I regained consciousness. His face drained of color. Evelyn shifted uncomfortably. That wasn't me. I turned to her slowly. You moved money from our investment account to fund a remodel in a house you weren't entitled to while I was unconscious, and married my cousin before I could speak again. That wasn't you either. She bit her lip. For the first time in months, I didn't see her as the woman I married. I saw her as someone who had studied my loyalty and used it as a map to rob me blind. The mediator asked if I wanted to make a statement. I stood. Not because I needed drama, but because I wanted to feel the weight of every truth I was about to speak.
I gave 30 years of my life to a woman who called me her safe place. I thought I was building something real. But when I collapsed, when I couldn't fight back, she didn't stand guard. She opened the door and invited the storm in. I paused. He thought my silence meant surrender. He never guessed it meant I was building a case. The room went still. The mediator asked Evelyn's lawyer if they had a response. He turned red. We'd like to take this under review. Celeste nodded. No problem, but in 2 days this goes public, and then it becomes a matter of court record. We left without another word. No handshake, no eye contact. Just the sound of chairs scraping the floor as we walked out, and left them sitting in their own collapse. That night, my phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn. It said, I didn't know how to live without you, so I tried to survive above you. I was wrong. I stared at the screen, then deleted it. No reply. Because sometimes the most powerful response is to give none at all. 2 days after the mediation, Evelyn's lawyer folded. They requested a private settlement. No court, no trial. Daniel and Celeste told me I could push it public, make them squirm beneath every headline. But I didn't need spectacle.
I just needed what was mine. The judge signed off on the revised agreement in chambers. The house was returned to my name. The joint investment account was split. My portion restored in full. Evelyn forfeited all claims to my pension, and Tony's fraudulent loan was attached to his personal credit. Quiet, clean, final. They thought I'd roar, but I whispered, and the wall still fell. I didn't move back into the house. I sold it. It wasn't home anymore. Too many ghosts in the walls. Too many memories that didn't belong to me anymore. I bought a small cottage on the edge of town. 1 floor, a porch that wrapped around like an embrace, a vegetable patch that had gone untended for years, just waiting for someone to believe in it again.
I started tending it. Tomatoes, peppers, collard greens, things that grew with slow, deliberate patience, like healing. I began volunteering at the local community center, teaching young men how to build. Chairs, shelves, quiet discipline. I didn't talk much about the past, not because I was hiding it, because it no longer needed retelling. The people who mattered knew the truth. The ones who didn't, they never mattered to begin with. Every Sunday, I made coffee and sat on the porch with my newspaper, watching the morning roll in slow and golden. Sometimes I'd catch myself listening for footsteps, for apologies, for regret. But there was only birdsong.
Only breeze and peace, real peace. Not the kind you're offered in exchange for silence, the kind you earn by surviving the storm and never letting it define you. One afternoon, my son came by. No call, just showed up. He sat on the porch beside me, eyes on the horizon. "I saw Mom," he said. "She looks different." I nodded. He hesitated. "I didn't believe you back then. I thought maybe you were bitter. But now I see it." He looked at me. "I'm sorry. Only breeze and peace, real peace. Not the kind you're offered in exchange for silence, the kind you earn by surviving the storm and never letting it define you." One afternoon, my son came by. No call, just showed up. He sat on the porch beside me, eyes on the horizon. "I saw Mom," he said. "She looks different." I nodded. He hesitated. "I didn't believe you back then. I thought maybe you were bitter. But now I see it." He looked at me. "I'm sorry."
And peace became something I had to build with my own hands. Weeks passed, then months, and slowly the ache turned into wisdom. Not all scars are visible. Some sit behind the smile. Others sharpen the way you listen when someone says, "I love you." One evening, just before sundown, I heard a knock at my door. It was Marcus, the young man I mentored at the community center. His eyes were red, his shoulders tense. I invited him in without a word. He sat on the edge of the couch, fidgeting. "She left me," he said. "Took the car, the savings, everything. Said I was too soft." He laughed bitterly. "I should have seen it.
My mom warned me. Everyone did. I waited, then said, "And you're here because?" He looked up at me like a boy and a broken man all at once. "Because I don't want to do something I'll regret." I nodded, got up, poured him tea. We sat there, silence stretching easy between us. Then I said, "Let me tell you a story." And I told him pieces of it, not the whole thing, just enough to help him breathe again. He asked, "How did you stay so calm? How did you not burn everything down?" I smiled. Because that's what they expected. They wanted my noise to drown out their guilt. Instead, I gave them silence and let the truth speak louder than I ever could. He shook his head, a mix of awe and grief. "You ever regret it, not lashing out?" I leaned forward. "Son, don't shout. Don't run. Think. Then move once, so clean and so strong that no one sees it coming. That's how you win." He nodded slowly, tears drying in his eyes. When he left, he hugged me, tight. And for a long while after he walked down the gravel path, I stood there, watching the sunset turn the sky to fire. In the distance, the wind carried faint laughter, neighbors enjoying a dinner outside, kids running barefoot. Life, still going. I turned, walked back into my house, and paused at the dining table. There was a small envelope sitting there, postmarked 3 weeks ago. No return address. I didn't open it. Didn't need to. Because sometimes the people who wrecked your soul want to have the last word. But I had already written mine, without revenge, without rage, just truth. And when the truth stands still, unmoving, unshaken, everything that pretends to be real crumbles on its own. I lit a candle, set the envelope in a drawer, then went out to the porch, poured myself a glass of cold water, and sat in the quiet. Nothing needed fixing. Nothing needed chasing. It was done. Not just the battle, but the old version of me, the one who begged to be loved right, to be chosen, to be believed. He was gone. And what stood in his place was a man who knew his worth. Even if the world forgot, even if love betrayed, even if silence was all that answered. Because sometimes, the quietest man at the table is the one holding the sharpest truth. And once you've lived through a betrayal that tried to bury you, peace isn't the absence of pain. It's the proof that you rose anyway. If this story spoke to something buried deep in you, share it. Tell your story in the comments. And don't forget, subscribe for more real stories of those who saw the storm and stood still until it passed.